We trust the lamb, not the donkey or the elephant.
At the beginning of the book, you talk about some faulty assumptions, and then you list them. And I just want to go through them here real quick. Um, you say sex is a purely
Right.
physical act. Now, these are faulty assumptions, at least assumptions you're challenging inside the book. But I think when people hear them, they're going to go, well, yeah, that's kind of what the culture believes right now. Sex is a purely physical act. Second, the absence of rules will make me happier. Third, my sex life is nobody's business. Fourth, women and men are basically the same. Now, a lot of people believe these faulty assumptions. What do you think's wrong with these? What do these assumptions get
Yeah, I
wrong about
mean,
sex?
I think that they're faulty assumptions, and exactly, I'm challenging people to rethink them. Um, I think at the core of all of these assumptions is just a sort of denial of reality, a denial of how our embodiment as
Hmm.
human persons and the spiritual aspect of our lives as human people affects how we experience sex, affects how we experience each other, and what we take from the world in our actions. So, for example, the faulty assumption that men and women are basically the same, right? I think that's a denial of the reality that we are embodied in two different sexes that have different experiences, and that extends to our relationships and our physicality. This idea that my sex life is no one's business but my own, denies the reality that we are embedded in communities and that our actions, even done in private, can have an impact on other people and our community at large. The idea that we can, kind of decide not to have feelings about things, basically. That sex doesn't mean anything, I think is really at odds with most people's experience of physical relationship with another person and what they take away from that and how that affects them both in the moment and in the days afterwards.
There seems to be a huge unwillingness to recognize that men and women experience sex differently. That there's a wanting, at least part of our culture wants to say, no, we are almost interchangeable. I'm familiar. I'm sure you're familiar with this sexual identity. I think it's real. It's called demisexual. And if you look it up, it's a sexual identity that says that people only want to have sex with people that they are in kind of loving, committed relationships with. And I scratched my head and I'm like, hang on a second. I thought that is what everybody, and to some degree, wants, and especially women have traditionally always wanted sex inside of those kinds of committed relationships. Why do you think people are unwilling to say men and women are different
Yeah,
when it
no,
comes to
that's
their experience
that's
of
a great
sex?
example. There's the sort of joke online is that demisexuality is just the sexuality of a heterosexual woman. Like, surprise! I want to have sex only with people who I
Huh.
trust and care about and who won't hurt me. Like, oh no, crazy, totally no orientation.
Or the one that you were talking about, the absence of rules will make me happier. And there is that kind of individualism that says, I just want to do what I want to do. And I resent Christianity, or I resent anyone who tries to impose on me any sort of standard. Do you feel like that is a criticism you got of your book? Because you're kind of suggesting that there are moral implications, that there are biological realities, that there are cultural damages done when we treat sex flippantly.
Yeah,
Have you
well, I
gotten any
mean,
pushback?
there are. You asked two good questions, and I'm going to go back to the first one actually about men and women first. I mean, I think that so yes. So first to acknowledge what you were saying, yeah, I think there is a real push to make equivalent the male and female experience in today's society, and I think it comes from a place of semi goodwill. At least I say semi goodwill that it's meant to be a good thing, but I think it's a little bit misdirected. So I write a lot in Rethinking Sex about the origins of the feminist movement and the early feminist view of the sexual revolution. And, you know, 50 years ago or so, there was kind of this idea, right, that men could do whatever they wanted. They were free to explore their sexuality. That was a normal thing. And women should just, be chaste and stay at home and not have any feelings and just do whatever they're told. Um, and I think over the past, several decades, there's been a push to say, like, no, women have feelings too. Women, should be able to explore their sexuality, their desires, understand themselves better. Yeah, that, women are real people, have as much power and agency as men do, or they should be able to have as much power and agency as men. And if men are allowed to do all of these things, women can do them too, and just as well as a man can. And in some situations, that's definitely true. But on the other hand, I think there are, frankly, limitations, or at least, a specificity to the female experience that is not true of the male experience. Women can get pregnant. Women are much more susceptible to sexual violence. But I think there's a fear in the current moment that if one acknowledges women's difference from men, women won't be viewed as equal to men in a sense, or they won't be viewed as, of equal value to men. There's a fear that by acknowledging difference, you're implicitly saying that men are better and women are worse. And so the solution has been to say, no, there's no difference at all. They're perfectly the same. Everyone is equal actually, and that's a good thing. And I do think that it's possible to say that, men and women are both human people, and all human people are valuable, and different does not have to mean worse. But that's kind of a lot of mental juggling, it seems, in this time of quick sloganeering. And so I think the default has just been to say they're all the same. There's no difference because that's seen as almost less threatening. So to that question, um,
Sorry, I threw too much at you at one time. I told you I was looking forward to our conversation. I have more than I can probably fit in, so I just am machine
oh,
gunning to
not at
you.
all.
I apologize again. Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's go to the culturals. Let's go to the culture's kind of minimum definition of
Mhm.
what makes an appropriate sexual
Right.
relationship, and that is consent. And in the book, you talk about consent being absolutely necessary. In other words, we don't want to get rid of consent. It's just that you say it's not sufficient. It's not enough. You talk about women that you talk to for the book, who say that they've had these sexual experiences that aren't rape, they're not sexual assault, and yet they feel obligatory. They feel like something that they owe or something that is expected, or they feel bad about themselves afterwards. That they're having sex with people and there's consent, but it's not wanted. Um, what should we put in place of consent? Like if consent isn't enough, it's necessary, but it's not
Yeah,
enough.
in
What do we need
Rethinking
to
Sex,
add to
I
it?
talk about how consent is the floor, but it was never meant to be the ceiling. Exactly as you say, consent is sufficient, or consent is necessary, but not sufficient, rather. Um, and I think that again, because we're sort of in this societal moment where people don't really want too many limitations. They're trying to, have as much freedom as possible. But we do kind of still need a minimum standard of behavior to define what's sort of criminal and what's not. Consent has sort of been settled on as the lowest common denominator. Consent that you got a yes from someone is sort of what separates sex from being rape or not rape. And we do need a legal standard. We do need, a bare minimum of what we can say is acceptable in some sense. But when we talk to, real individuals and we're talking about how not to just be, not a rapist or not a criminal, but actually a good person, we need more than that bare minimum. Because I think most people in their romantic relationships, in their sexual relationships, want more from their encounters with another person than to say, I wasn't sexually assaulted or I'm not a rapist. I think most people want to be better than that. And so I think we need a positive vision of what good sex is, a positive vision of what a good relational encounter looks like. And in Rethinking Sex, I define that as the idea of willing the good of the other. That if we're actually looking for an ethic, not a bare minimum, what we should be attempting to do in our relationships is will the good of the other person. And so that's actually Aristotle by way of St. Thomas Aquinas. And in fact, it kind of boils down to almost the golden rule, but with a little bit of extra, I guess. When we're talking about willing the good of the other, it's the idea of willing the other person in the encounter, making sure that their experience is good, as good as what you would will for yourself. But that actually entails more than just consent, more than just sort of asking them.
Hey, I'm Keith. Thanks for watching the video. If you're interested in ending tribalism like we are, we have a podcast and a book. Both are called Truth Over Tribe. You can listen to the podcast on Apple or Spotify, and you can get the book off Amazon. I hope you'll check them out.